Hey everyone, tonight we're heading to a place not in the distant past but in recent memory. You're in a provincial Russian city in the early 2000s. The air is cold and smells of industrial pollution and damp concrete. You're surrounded by grey, crumbling Soviet-era apartment blocks, a rusting, silent factory on the horizon, and a generation of young people with no jobs and even less hope. But in the cramped kitchens of these apartment blocks, a new and terrifying chemistry is being born. It's a cheap, homemade substitute for heroin, a drug that promises a few moments of escape but extracts a terrible price. Let's be honest. In this world, you're not afraid of monsters under the bed. You're afraid of the monster you inject into your own veins, a drug nicknamed Krokodil for what it does to your skin before it eats you alive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, I'd love to see where in the world you're listening from, so please drop your city and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Some stories are not about ancient kings or forgotten battles. They are about the quiet, modern tragedies that grow in the cracks of a collapsed empire. You are a visitor to this grey city, a witness to a public health crisis that is just beginning to unfold. You are here to understand not just the drug, but the despair that created it. You are here to document the story of Krokodil. Your journey begins with the screech of train brakes, a long metallic groan that echoes in the cold, damp air. You have arrived. You step from the old, Soviet-era train onto a concrete platform and get your first look at the city. It is a landscape painted in 1,000 shades of grey. Before you are rows upon rows of identical 5-story crumbling concrete apartment blocks, their facades stained with rust and pollution. The sky is a low, heavy and featureless blanket of grey cloud. This is a Russian industrial city in the early 2000s. A place that time and progress seem to have forgotten. You walk through the streets, and the sense of profound post-Soviet decay is everywhere. The wide, grand avenues, built for proud May Day parades, are now cracked and potholed. A faded, peeling mural of a heroic factory worker adorns the side of a building, a ghostly reminder of a forgotten ideology. In the central square, a statue of Lenin still stands, but its base is crumbling, a deposed king surveying a ruined kingdom. The narration explains the nature of this place. This is a monotown, a city built by the Soviet state with a single, all-encompassing purpose. Its entire existence was tied to the colossal, sprawling factory that dominates the skyline. For generations, the factory was the city. It provided the jobs, the apartments, the hospitals, and the identity of everyone who lived here. You walk towards the factory now, the source of the city's former life, and you are met with a profound and unnerving silence. The great gates are rusted shut. The smokestacks are cold and empty against the grey sky. Broken windows stare out like vacant eyes. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the state-run industries that were the lifeblood of cities like this one collapsed with it. The factory did not just close, it died, and it took the city's soul with it. You see the people, and you see the human cost of this collapse. You see the older generation, the men and women who worked in the factory their entire lives. They move with a kind of weary resignation, their faces etched with a permanent nostalgia for a time of stability and purpose, however flawed it may have been. But it is the young people who are the true ghosts of this city. You see them everywhere. Groups of young men in their late teens and early 20s, standing on street corners smoking cheap cigarettes with nothing to do and nowhere to go. They are the lost generation, born too late for the Soviet dream and left behind by the new, cutthroat capitalism of Moscow. They are surrounded by the decaying monuments of a powerful empire, but they have inherited none of its strength, only its ruins. You can feel their boredom, their frustration, and the deep, gnawing hopelessness of a life lived without a future. As dusk falls, the city does not come alive, it simply gets darker. A few dim lights flicker on in the apartment blocks. You find your way to a small, stark hotel, your room overlooking a courtyard of cracked concrete. You look out at the rows of identical, lightless windows, and you feel the immense, collective despair of a community left behind by the new Russia. You have not yet seen the drug you came here to find. You have not yet witnessed its horrifying effects. But you have seen the world that created it. You have seen the poverty, the decay, and the hopelessness. You understand now that the drug is not the disease, it is merely a symptom of a much deeper sickness. A soldier's journey is supposed to end when he returns home. He trades the rigid order of the barracks for the gentle rhythm of a life he fought to protect. But what happens when the home he returns to is more broken than the battlefield he left? You are about to meet a young man who has survived a war, only to find himself fighting a new, quieter, and more hopeless battle for his own future. Your investigation into the city's despair brings you to a small, cramped apartment on the 4th floor of one of the crumbling concrete blocks. Here, you meet Dima. He is in his early 20s, his body still lean and strong from his recently completed mandatory military service, but his youth is overshadowed by a haunted, restless look in his eyes. You learn he has recently returned from the war in Chechnya, and you can feel that the violence and trauma of that conflict still linger just beneath the surface. He is not alone. With him is his girlfriend, Anya. She is the single point of light in this grey, decaying world. She works a low-paying job in a small shop, and her face is full of a fierce, determined optimism. You see the deep, genuine love between them. She is his anchor, his reason for trying to build a future in a city that seems to have none. You are a silent witness in their small home. They have done their best to create an island of order and warmth. The small room is clean. A colourful blanket is draped over the old, worn sofa, and a pot of soup simmers on the stove. But you cannot escape the signs of the world outside. You see the cracked plaster on the walls, you feel the cold draft from the poorly sealed window, and you look out at the same monotonous view of other grey, concrete buildings. You follow Dima as he begins his daily, soul-crushing routine, the search for a job. You stand with him at the massive, rusted gates of the silent factory, where a faded, hand-painted no-job sign hangs like a final verdict. You follow him to construction sites, where he is turned away with a curt shake of the head. You are a witness to his slow, grinding humiliation. He is a man who was trained to be a soldier, to follow orders, to endure hardship, to fight for his country. But here, in the civilian world, those skills are worthless. His pride, the pride of a soldier who has served, is being eroded with each closed door. You are there in the evenings, a quiet presence in their small kitchen. In the early days of his return, the conversations are full of hope. Dima speaks of finding work, of saving money, of marrying Anya and starting a family. But as the weeks turn into months, you hear the hope in his voice begin to curdle into a bitter, cynical frustration. He talks of the corruption, of how all the good jobs go to the sons of the well-connected. He speaks of a country that used him as a soldier and then threw him away. Anya tries to fight his growing despair. You see her hold his hand, her voice full of encouragement, reminding him of their plans, of their love. But you can feel the growing strain between her unwavering hope and his encroaching disillusionment. One evening, you follow Dima as he meets with some old friends, other young men who also served in the army and are now also unemployed. They gather in a cold courtyard, sharing a bottle of cheap, harsh vodka. You listen as they talk. They do not speak of the future, they speak of the war, of the past. Their conversation is a litany of shared hopelessness. Then, one of the men, his eyes holding a strange, dull gleam, talks about a new, cheap way to escape for a few hours. He speaks of a recipe, of a feeling that makes you forget everything. The name of the drug is not spoken, but the idea hangs in the cold air, a dark and tempting promise. You watch Dima. He listens, And then, after a moment, he shakes his head and takes another long swallow of vodka. For now, the thought of Anya, the promise of the life he still hopes to build with her, is enough to hold him back. You are with him as he walks home through the dark, empty streets. The hope is still there, but it is fragile. You can feel the immense, crushing pressure on him, the pressure to find work, to be a man, to live up to the future Anya believes in, all in a world that offers him nothing but closed doors and the ghosts of a forgotten war. A black market is like a river. If you dam it in one place, the water does not simply vanish. It finds a new, more treacherous path. It carves its way through the cracks, seeking the path of least resistance. You are about to witness the birth of a new, toxic tributary, a market born not from smuggling, but from the simple, legal shelves of a neighborhood pharmacy. Your investigation into the city's underbelly begins with a puzzle. You are here to understand the drug scene, but the old stories no longer make sense. You have learned that a recent and aggressive government crackdown on heroin trafficking has choked the supply from Afghanistan. The city's registered addicts are in a state of quiet panic. Heroin, the old king, has become scarce and impossibly expensive. Yet, the problem of addiction is not shrinking, it is getting worse. A new, cheaper and more destructive ghost is haunting these grey streets, and you are trying to find its source. You are not looking in the right places, you are looking for secret handoffs in dark alleys, for smugglers and dealers. But a local contact, a weary former police officer, finally tells you the new truth. Stop looking for the criminals, he says, his voice full of a cynical resignation. The new dealers wear white coats. They work in the apteca. The pharmacy? He leads you to a small, unassuming storefront on a windswept corner. It is a typical neighborhood pharmacy. You step inside, and the air smells of disinfectant and old paper. The scene is utterly mundane. An elderly woman is at the counter, buying a folk remedy for her joints. A young mother is trying to quiet a crying child while purchasing vitamins. But you wait, and you watch, and then you see them. A group of 3 young men enter. They look just like Dima's friends. Their movements are jittery, their eyes are hollow, and their faces have a pale, unhealthy sheen. They do not approach the counter with the furtive fear of criminals. They walk up with the casual confidence of regular customers. You are a witness to the quiet, open secret. One of the young men speaks to the pharmacist, a middle-aged woman with a tired, impassive face. He does not whisper. He asks for 5 boxes of a common codeine-based headache pill. The pharmacist doesn't blink. She places the boxes on the counter. Then he asks for a small bottle of iodine. She adds it to the pile. And finally, he asks for 10 boxes of matches. The transaction is completed with a mundane exchange of crumpled rubles. The young men take their small paper bag of ingredients and leave. You watch the pharmacist. She does not look relieved. She does not look guilty. She looks nothing at all. She simply turns to the next customer. A few minutes later, another group arrives, and you witness the same strange shopping list recited again. Codeine pills, iodine, and matchbooks. It happens again and then again. This is not a secret drug deal. This is a routine, a steady and unremarkable flow of commerce. You leave the pharmacy, a profound chill settling over you that has nothing to do with the cold Russian wind. Your contact explains the horrifyingly simple chemistry. The codeine pills are the base, the opioid that provides the high, the iodine and the red phosphorus, which they will painstakingly scrape from the striker pads of the matchbooks, are the chemical reagents. Elsewhere, they will buy the gasoline, the paint thinner, the hydrochloric acid. You now have the full poisonous recipe. You understand the terrible truth of this new epidemic. Its source is not a foreign cartel or a shadowy underworld boss. Its source is a legal loophole. An over-the-counter system that has turned neighborhood pharmacies into the unwitting, or perhaps willfully blind, suppliers of a plague. The secret, you realize with a sickening feeling is that there is no secret at all. It is all happening right here, in plain sight. Alchemy is an ancient dream, the search for a magic that can turn lead into gold, dross into purity. But there is a darker, more modern kind of alchemy. A kitchen table chemistry that does not seek to create wealth, but to distill a few moments of oblivion. You are about to witness this grim process, a recipe that turns medicine and poison into a liquid curse. Your investigation leads you to a specific apartment on the top floor of a decaying concrete block. The hallway smells of boiled cabbage, dampness, and cheap tobacco. You are brought here to meet the man they call the Cook, and to witness the dark heart of the Krokodil epidemic. You are here to see how the monster is made. You step into a small, dark apartment. The air is immediately shockingly thick with a chemical stench that burns the back of your throat. It is the sharp, volatile smell of gasoline and iodine, a foul and poisonous perfume. In the main room, several young men are sitting in a state of lethargic quiet, waiting. But your guide leads you to the source of the smell, the tiny, grimy kitchen. This is the domain of Sergei, the cook. He is an older man, gaunt and sallow-skinned, but his eyes are sharp and focused, and his hands move with a steady, practiced precision. He is not a mad scientist. He is a grim artisan, a man who has mastered a deadly recipe. His laboratory is a stained and cluttered countertop. You see a single, rusty electric hot plate, an array of stained glass jars and plastic soda bottles, and a collection of dirty spoons and syringes, and you see the ingredients you witnessed being purchased at the pharmacy, the empty boxes of codeine pills, the bottle of iodine, and a small mountain of torn-out matchbook striker pads. You are a silent witness to the disturbing alchemical process. You watch as Sergei crushes the codeine pills into a fine white powder on a dirty plate. He then takes a knife and painstakingly scrapes the red phosphorus from the matchbook strips, adding the dark, gritty powder to the codeine. This mixture is then spooned into a glass jar. Then comes the poison. He pours in a measure of gasoline, the industrial solvent swirling the powders into a murky brown sludge. He adds the iodine, which turns the mixture a deep, angry purple. This concoction is then placed on the hot plate and gently heated. You watch the liquid bubble and hiss, releasing a thick chemical vapor that makes your eyes water and your head spin. This is not a clean or sterile process. It is a work of desperate, dangerous improvisation. There is no ventilation. The risk of an explosion or a chemical fire is immense, but the men in this room are far beyond caring about such risks. And then you see him. Sitting on a stool in the corner of the kitchen, his face illuminated by the sickly glow of the hot plate, is Dima. He is here. He is part of this. The haunted, restless young man you met, who was still trying to build a life with Anya, is gone. The man sitting here is quieter, his eyes holding a hollow, singular focus. He is watching the jar, waiting. His tragic journey has begun. He has crossed the line from a disillusioned soldier into an addict. After what feels like an eternity, the cooking is done. Sergei removes the jar from the heat. The final step is a crude filtration. The hot, foul-smelling liquid is drawn up through a cigarette filter into a syringe. The resulting fluid is a clear, amber color, like a dark and poisonous tea. Sergei, the kitchen chemist, has completed his work. He has transformed a handful of common household items into a dose of potent and deeply contaminated opioid. He has not created gold from lead, but a fleeting escape from a world of dross at a terrible, unseen price. You watch as he hands the full syringe to one of the waiting men, and your gaze shifts back to Dima, who is next in line. Every person has a scent, a familiar landscape of soap and skin and work. It is the quiet, intimate language of closeness, a truth told without words. But what happens when that familiar landscape is invaded by a new alien odor? A smell that speaks not of home, but of a secret, hidden world. You are about to witness a confrontation born not from a lie that was heard, but from a truth that was smelled. You are in the small, clean apartment that Dima and Anya share. It is late, and the winter darkness presses against the window panes. Anya has been waiting for hours. You are a silent witness to her growing anxiety. She has prepared a simple, warm meal, which now sits cold on the stove. She tidies the already tidy room, her small, restless movements a testament to her worry. This small apartment is a sanctuary of hope that she has built against the grim reality of the city outside, and she is fighting to protect it. Finally, you hear the sound of a key in the lock. The door opens, and Dima stumbles in. You see him, and you know instantly that he is not the same man who left that morning. His movements are slow, heavy, and uncoordinated. His eyes, which were once full of a restless fire, are now glassy, distant, and dull. He seems to be moving through a thick, invisible fog. Anya rushes to him, her face a mixture of relief and concern. "Dima, where have you been? I was so worried." She goes to embrace him, and then she stops. She recoils, her face wrinkling in confusion and disgust. It is the smell. You can smell it too, now that he has brought it into the clean air of the apartment. It is not the familiar, honest smell of sweat and street dust. It is not the sharp scent of cheap vodka. It is a strange, foul chemical odor, an alien presence in this small room. It is a bitter, acrid smell of burnt chemicals, of iodine, and something else, something like gasoline or solvent. It is the smell of the kitchen chemist's workshop. "What is that smell?" Anya asks, her voice now a whisper of dawning fear. "Dima, what is on your clothes?" You watch him as he tries to form a lie. He is clumsy, his mind slow and clouded. "It is nothing," he mumbles, avoiding her eyes. "I was helping a friend with his car." The lie is thin and pathetic, and you both know it. You witness the beginning of her long, painful battle. She does not yet know what she is fighting, but she knows she is fighting for the man she loves. She follows him into the room, her questions growing more insistent, more desperate. You can feel her heart breaking as he continues to lie, to build a wall of denial between them. The confrontation escalates. In her frustration, she grabs his arm, and he flinches away in pain. She pulls up the sleeve of his jacket, and you both see it, a fresh, angry-looking puncture mark on the inside of his elbow, a small, violent testament to the truth he is trying to hide. The sight of the needle mark shatters his denial, and his frustration boils over into a cold, cruel anger. "Leave me alone," he snarls, his voice, the voice of a stranger. "It is none of your business." You watch as Anya's face crumbles. This is not just a fight, it is a betrayal. The man she loves, the man whose despair she has been trying to soothe, has retreated into a secret world that he will not let her enter. But then you see something else in her eyes. Behind the tears and the pain, you see a flicker of fierce, unyielding resolve. She will not lose him to this. She will not let this strange, foul-smelling poison steal the man she loves. The chapter of their shared hope has ended. A new, terrible chapter of her lonely war has just begun. Dima, his energy spent, collapses onto the sofa and falls into a heavy, unnatural chemical sleep. You are left with Anya in the quiet, tense apartment. She stands for a long time, looking at the man she barely recognizes. Then, with a quiet, heartbreaking finality, she takes the cold, uneaten meal from the stove and throws it away. The mind can hide a secret, the heart can bury a pain, but the body always tells the truth. It is an honest historian, a canvas that records every battle, every poison, every wound. You are about to see the first, terrible chapter of a story being written on a young man's skin, a story of a chemical war being lost from within. Several months have passed since you first witnessed the confrontation between Dima and Anya. The Russian winter has descended upon the city, a season of deep, biting cold and a sun that is a pale, distant stranger. You have continued your investigation, and your journey now leads you back into the city's desperate underbelly to the apartment building where Sergei, the cook, plies his grim trade. You find Dima here. He is no longer in the small, clean apartment he shared with Anya. He now lives, it seems, in this dark, foul-smelling hub of addiction. You see him, and you are immediately struck by the change. He has lost a significant amount of weight. His face is pale and gaunt, and his eyes have a new, hunted look to them. The restless energy of the frustrated soldier is gone, replaced by the jittery, anxious movements of a man whose entire world has shrunk to a single, all-consuming need. He and the others are preparing a new batch of Krokodil. The grim, alchemical ritual you witnessed before is repeated. But your focus is on Dima. He rolls up the sleeve of his worn, dirty sweater to prepare his arm for the injection, and you see it. This is the drug's signature. This is the reason for its monstrous name. The skin around his injection sites, on the inside of his elbow and along his forearm, is no longer just bruised. It has transformed into something alien. It is a patch of discolored greenish-grey flesh, mottled and tough. The surface is rough and has a fine, flaky texture, like the hide of a reptile. It is the scaly skin of the crocodile. You watch, a silent, horrified observer, and you understand what you are seeing. The narration explains the grim, medical reality. The toxic, unpurified cocktail of chemicals he is injecting is not being processed by his body. The gasoline, the iodine, the phosphorus, they are a direct caustic poison. They are attacking the walls of his veins, causing them to harden and rot. The surrounding soft tissue is dying from a lack of blood flow and from the poison seeping into it. This is not a rash. This is not an infection. This is the first stage of necrosis. It is the beginning of his body literally eating itself from the inside out. He finds a spot on the edge of this dying patch of skin to make the injection. He does not flinch. His focus is absolute. You see the brief, euphoric rush as the drug hits, a wave of warmth and oblivion that smooths the hard, anxious lines on his face for a few fleeting moments, and then the lethargy sets in. You look around the room. Anya is not here. The pictures of her that Dima once kept are gone. Her world of hope and clean linen and warm meals has no place in this den of decay. He has pushed her away, or she has been forced to retreat, unable to fight the chemical monster that has claimed the man she loved. The atmosphere in the room is one of a living death. There is no conversation, no camaraderie. There is only the grim, silent, and repetitive cycle. The brief, narcotic peace, followed by the anxious, jittery low, and then the frantic, single-minded focus on preparing the next dose. It is a full-time job, and the only wage is a slow, agonizing suicide. You are left with the powerful, haunting image of Dima's arm. It is a topographical map of his own destruction, a visible testament to the poison he is putting into his veins. You now understand that the drug's name is not a metaphor. It is a literal, horrifyingly accurate description of the fate that awaits its users. The crocodile has taken its first bite, and you know with a cold, sickening certainty that it will not be its last. A doctor is a warrior, a fighter against the chaos of disease. But what happens when the war is unwinnable? When the enemy is a poison the patient willingly invites in, and the battlefield is a hospital with no medicine and no beds? You are about to meet such a warrior, a doctor whose only remaining weapon is the calm, quiet, and heartbreaking act of bearing witness. Your investigation into the city's secret plague leads you to the doors of the main municipal hospital. It is another crumbling concrete relic of the Soviet era, a place that feels more like a monument to a forgotten past than a modern medical facility. The air inside is a grim cocktail of antiseptic, unwashed bodies, and a faint, sweet, underlying smell of decay that you are beginning to recognize. You are here to meet Dr. Tikhonova. You find her in a crowded, chaotic ward. She is a woman in her 50s, her face etched with a profound, bone-deep weariness, but her eyes are sharp, intelligent, and miss nothing. Her white coat is clean but frayed at the cuffs. She agrees to speak with you, to show you the reality of the epidemic that is devouring her city. She speaks in a calm, clinical, and exhausted voice, a voice that has been stripped of all emotion by the sheer, repetitive horror of what she sees every day. She is not here to shock you. She is here to document a public health catastrophe. You want to understand Krokodil? She says, her voice a low murmur. Come, I will show you its life story. She leads you to the first bed. In it is a young man, his face pale and sweating. She gently pulls back the sheet from his arm. You see that it is swollen and covered in dark, hard, lumpy tracks. This is the beginning, she explains. This is thrombophlebitis. The chemicals, the gasoline, the acid, they burn the veins from the inside. The veins clot, harden, and collapse. The body is trying to heal, but the poison is injected again and again into the same damaged tissue. You move to the next bed. The patient here is further along. The smell is stronger. The doctor pulls back a bandage from the man's leg, and you see that the tough, scaly skin has broken down, forming a large, weeping, open sore. This is the second stage, she says, her voice a monotone. These are abscesses. The tissue is dying from a lack of blood flow. The body's defenses are overwhelmed. From here, the infection spreads. She leads you to a third bed, at the far end of the ward, in a corner by itself. The smell here is overpowering. This, she says, her voice dropping even lower, is the end of the story. You look at the patient's arm, and you struggle to comprehend what you are seeing. It is no longer recognizable as a human limb. The flesh is a landscape of greens and blacks, swollen to twice its normal size. In several places, the skin and muscle have rotted away completely, exposing the stark, white gleam of the bone beneath. This is gangrene. The poison has done its work, Dr. Tikhonova says, her face betraying no emotion. The tissue is dead. The only way to save his life is to amputate the arm. But even then, the damage to his liver, his kidneys, his brain, it is likely too late. You stand there, a silent, horrified witness, as she calmly explains the medical progression. She tells you that she sees dozens of new cases like this every month. She speaks of the lack of resources, not enough beds, not enough antibiotics, not enough surgical staff. She tells you of the terrible central paradox of her work. Her patients are not fighting for their lives. They are in the grip of an addiction so powerful that she has seen men inject Krokodil into a gangrenous leg the night before it is scheduled to be amputated. You follow her back to her small, cluttered office. She is silent for a long time. Then she opens a drawer and pulls out a photograph. It is a picture of a smiling, healthy-looking young man. This was one of the first, she says. He died 6 months after this picture was taken. His body was like the one you just saw. You leave the hospital, the clinical, dispassionate words of the doctor echoing in your mind, a stark and terrible counterpoint to the horrific images you have just seen. You now understand the full medical reality of the crocodile's bite. You have seen the inevitable, agonizing end of the path that Dima is now walking. Of all the senses, smell is the most ancient, the most honest. It bypasses reason and speaks directly to the oldest parts of our brain, the parts that understand survival and decay. A single scent can tell a story of a coming spring, a meal being prepared, or, as you are about to discover, the slow, sweet, and sickly story of a body coming apart. Weeks have passed since your visit to the hospital. The calm, clinical words of Dr. Tikhonova and the horrific images from her ward have haunted your waking thoughts. You have seen the grim prognosis. Now, you must return to the source. You must see the progression of the disease for yourself. You make your way back to the familiar, crumbling concrete apartment block where Sergei, the cook, holds his grim court. The Russian winter is at its peak, and the air in the concrete stairwell is sterile and freezing. But as you climb the flights of stairs, a new smell begins to cut through the cold. It is faint at first, an unfamiliar and deeply unpleasant odor that you cannot immediately place. With each floor you ascend, the smell grows stronger, thicker. By the time you reach the landing of Sergei's apartment, it is an almost physical presence, a foul miasma that seems to cling to the back of your throat. You enter the apartment. The old, familiar chemical stench is still there, the sharp, acrid bite of gasoline and iodine, but it is no longer the dominant smell. It is now just a single, harsh note in a far more complex and sickening symphony. The new smell is overwhelming. It is a cloying, sweet and sickly scent, the smell of overripe fruit and something else, something metallic and foul. You remember the weary, resigned look on Dr. Tikhonova's face. This is the smell she warned you about. It is the smell of rotting human tissue. The atmosphere of the apartment has been transformed by this odor. It is no longer just a place of grim chemical desperation. It is now a tomb, a place of active, living decay. The smell has permeated everything. It is in the greasy curtains, in the worn-out furniture, in the very air you are struggling to breathe. You look at the men in the room. You see Sergei, Dima, and a few others. They have changed. The scaly skin you witnessed on Dima's arm was only the beginning. You now see the evidence of a body at war with itself. You see crude, dirty bandages wrapped around their arms and legs, some stained with a dark, weeping fluid. The scaly patches have progressed to open. Ulcerous sores. You focus on Dima. He is a shadow of the man he was. His face is gaunt, his eyes are sunken into dark, bruised-looking sockets. You see a fresh, filthy bandage on his lower leg, and you understand with a sickening certainty that the veins in his arms have collapsed completely, forcing him to find new, more dangerous places to inject the poison. But the most shocking thing is their obliviousness. They do not seem to notice the smell. They have been living in it for so long that it has become the normal atmosphere of their world. Their universe has shrunk to the short, vicious cycle of the drug, the agitated, obsessive work of cooking the next batch, the brief, fleeting oblivion of the high, and the long, slow, miserable descent back into a reality that now includes the stench of their own bodies falling apart. You watch them, a small community of ghosts, haunting the ruins of their own flesh. There is no conversation, no connection. There is only a shared, desperate and silent focus on the next injection. You have witnessed the final stage of their isolation. They are not just cut off from the outside world, from jobs and from family. They are now cut off from their own bodies, which they treat as nothing more than instruments for delivering the drug, even as the drug is systematically devouring them. You cannot stay. The air is too thick. The atmosphere too heavy with death. You make your excuses and step back out into the stairwell. You rush down the stairs and burst out of the building into the freezing, clean winter air. You take a deep, desperate breath, but you find that the smell has followed you. It has clung to your clothes, to your hair, to the inside of your nostrils. It is a scent you know you will never forget. You have smelled the crocodile's bite. Every journey into darkness has a threshold, a line that, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. It is the point of no return, where the hope of turning back is extinguished, and all that remains is the long, final descent. You are about to witness such a moment, a final, desperate plea at the very edge of the abyss. You find Anya standing outside the grim, concrete apartment block where Dima now lives. It is a cold, bleak afternoon. You have not seen her for weeks, and the change in her is heartbreaking. The fierce, determined optimism in her eyes has been replaced by the haunted, exhausted look of a soldier on the verge of surrendering a long and hopeless war. She tells you she has been trying to see Dima for days, but he or his friends have refused to let her in. Today she is making one last attempt, and she asks you to come with her, as a witness, as a small, silent anchor of the sane world she is trying to reach. You ascend the familiar, foul-smelling stairs and enter the apartment. The sweet, sickly smell of decay you remember from your last visit is now an overwhelming, suffocating presence that catches in your throat. The room is dark, the curtains drawn, and in the gloom you see him. You see Dima, and your mind struggles to connect this figure to the young, strong soldier you met what feels like a lifetime ago. He is skeletal, a fragile collection of bones draped in filthy clothes. But it is his arm that commands your attention. It is no longer a human arm. From the elbow down, it is swollen to twice its normal size, the flesh a mottled, hideous landscape of black and dark green. It is severe gangrene. The tissue is dead, and as the chapter's description notes, the flesh has turned black and is beginning to rot away. You are a witness to Anya's final, desperate attempt to save the man she loves. She ignores the filth of the room. She ignores the other hollow-eyed addicts watching from the corners. She ignores the terrible smell. She kneels before Dima, her voice not angry, but a low, desperate, and heartbreaking plea. "Dima," she whispers, her hands reaching for his good arm. "Please, look at me. I spoke to the doctor. You are dying. She said if they don't amputate, the infection will kill you. It will be a matter of days." You watch his face. There is a flicker of something in his eyes. Pain, fear, a memory of the man he once was. Anya sees it too and presses on, her words a torrent of desperate hope. "We can leave here. We can go to the hospital right now. We can start over. Please, Dima, come back." This is the final battle. It is the core conflict, not between Anya and Dima, but between the last, dying ember of Dima's will to live and the all-consuming monstrous power of his addiction. He is in constant, agonizing pain from his rotting limb. But you can see in his trembling hands and his sweating brow that the pain of his body beginning to crave its next dose is even greater. His eyes drift away from Anya's face towards the kitchen where Sergei is silently preparing another batch. The choice is made. "No," he whispers, his voice a dry, rattling sound. "I can't. You," and she, understand the terrible, insane logic in that moment. To go to the hospital is to be cut off from the drug. In the twisted calculus of his addiction, the short-term agony of withdrawal is a more terrifying prospect than the certainty of death from gangrene. His addiction is too powerful. You watch as Anya's face, which had been so full of a desperate fighting hope, finally collapses. The battle is over. She has lost. The man she loved is already gone. A ghost sitting before her who has just chosen a chemical over his own life. She rises slowly to her feet, her movements stiff and empty. She looks at him one last time, a long, silent, heartbreaking farewell. Then, without another word, she turns and walks out of the apartment. You follow her, leaving Dima and the other ghosts to their ritual. You stand with her for a moment in the cold, silent stairwell. The door to the apartment closes with a soft, final click. You have just witnessed the point of no return. We think of death as a single moment, a final breath. But there is another kind of death, a slower and perhaps more terrible kind. It is the death of the self, the gradual hollowing out of a person until nothing is left but a ghost, a shell animated by a single desperate need. You are about to say farewell, not to a man, but to the memory of a man you once knew. Weeks have passed since you witnessed Anya's heartbreaking departure. The story of Dima has reached its inevitable, tragic final act. Driven by a somber duty to see this story to its end, you return to Sergei's apartment one last time. You prepare yourself for what you will find, but the reality is still a profound and soul-crushing shock. The apartment is a tomb. The air is thick and almost unbreathable with the sweet, cloying stench of decay. The few other addicts who remain are like spectres, their gaunt bodies curled up in the dim, grey light, lost in a chemical stupor. And then you see him, you see Dima. He is lying on a filthy mattress in the corner of the room. He is a skeletal figure, so emaciated that his bones seem to be on the verge of breaking through his waxy grey skin. He is a ghost. His body, as the chapter's description notes, is a landscape of open, weeping wounds. The arm you last saw ravaged by gangrene is now a dead, black and skeletal thing, a mummified limb attached to a barely living body. The infection has spread, creating new sores on his legs and chest, but it is his face that is the most terrible sight of all. The young, hopeful soldier you met is gone. The frustrated, angry young man is gone. Even the haunted, desperate addict is gone. The person before you now is a hollow shell. His eyes are open, but they are vacant, unfocused, staring at a point in a reality that you cannot see. There is no recognition, no spark of consciousness, no memory of the life he once lived. You approach him. You speak his name, softly at first, then a little louder. There is no response. He does not turn his head. He does not blink. He is not there. He is no longer the young man you met. He is a hollow shell, his mind and body completely consumed by the drug. His entire existence has been stripped down to a few primal, involuntary functions: the shallow rise and fall of his chest, and the deep, insatiable craving of his body's cells for the poison that is destroying them. You are a witness to the final, total victory of the drug. It has not just destroyed his body, it has devoured his soul. It has erased the person, leaving behind only the shell of the addiction itself. You watch as Sergei, the cook, approaches him. He is not a caregiver, he is a grim mechanic. He finds a viable vein in Dima's neck, and with a practiced indifference, administers another dose. You see a flicker of something in Dima's eyes, a brief, momentary easing of some unseen internal torment. This is all that is left of his life. A cycle of chemical agony followed by a few moments of chemical peace. There is nothing more to see here. There is nothing more to document. The story of Dima is over. You turn and walk away, leaving the dim, foul-smelling room. As you close the door, you hear a low, rattling cough from the mattress in the corner. You walk out of the apartment block and into the cold, clean air. You have just said goodbye to a man who is already dead, a ghost waiting for his body to finally, mercifully catch up. The tragedy is no longer in what will happen to him, but in what has already been lost. A hospital is a house of hope, a fortress against the final darkness. It is a place of clean sheets, of medicine, of quiet, urgent battles fought to save a life. But sometimes, when a plague descends upon a city, a hospital can become something else entirely. It becomes a house of waiting, a quiet, orderly warehouse for the dying. You are about to enter such a place, to see the end of a life not as a grand tragedy, but as a quiet, bureaucratic statistic. Your perspective shifts. You are no longer the outside observer. For this brief, tragic chapter, you are Dr. Tikhonova. It is 30 hours into a 48-hour shift. The air in your hospital is a familiar, grim miasma of antiseptic, sickness, and the sweet, cloying smell of gangrene that the nurses can never quite scrub away. Every bed in your ward is full. Every chair in the hallway has a patient. You are a doctor in a city under siege, and your enemy is a poison that your patients willingly inject into their own veins. You are in your small, cluttered office, trying to finish a mountain of paperwork when a nurse calls you. "Another one," she says, her voice flat with an exhaustion that mirrors your own. "Ambulance just brought him in. Overdose, and, well, you know." You do know. You walk to the emergency bay. The paramedics are wheeling in a young man on a gurney. He is delirious, his body trembling with a septic fever. You look at his arm, and you see the familiar, horrifying landscape of a Krokodil addict in the final stage. The flesh is black and green, a dead, rotting limb attached to a barely living body. You begin the calm, automatic, and ultimately futile ritual of your work. You check his vitals. His pulse is weak and rapid, his blood pressure dangerously low, his fever is raging. You look at his face. He is young, perhaps in his early 20s, but his features are so gaunt and sunken that he looks like an old man. You try to ask him his name, but he only moans, his eyes rolling back in his head. This is Dima. You may not know his name, but you know his story. You have seen it 100 times before. You know instantly that there is nothing you can do to save him. The infection from his gangrenous wounds has overwhelmed his body. It is a condition known as sepsis. His organs are shutting down. He is already dead. His body just hasn't finished the process yet. There are no heroic measures to be taken here. There is no room in the intensive care unit. All you can offer is palliative care. You turn to the nurse. Morphine, you say, your voice a tired whisper, for the pain. Then you ask, do we have a bed? She shakes her head, her expression a familiar mask of weary resignation. The wards are overflowing, doctor. There is nowhere to put him. You are a healer, a person trained to fight for every single life, but you are also a pragmatist, a soldier in a losing war. Your resources are finite, and they must be saved for those who still have a chance. You make the grim, necessary decision you are forced to make every single day. Put him on a gurney in the hallway, you say. Out of the way. Keep him comfortable. You walk away to attend to the living, to the patients you might still be able to save. An hour later, you pass through the hallway again. You see him there, a still form under a thin blanket, just another piece of human wreckage in the crowded corridor of your failing hospital. You pause for a moment by his side. You look at his face, and in the harsh fluorescent light, for a fleeting second, you see past the decay. You see the face of a young man, a boy, someone who was once a soldier, a son, a lover. You see the ghost of the person he was before the drug erased him. The next time you pass, his gurney is empty. The nurse catches your eye and gives a slight, almost imperceptible shake of her head. It is over. You go back to your office. You take out a form, and you begin to fill it out. Name, John Doe. Cause of death, septic shock. It is just another piece of paperwork. He has become a statistic in your city's quiet, undeclared war. Grief is a language, but it is not always spoken in the same dialect. There is the loud, noble grief for a soldier or a king, a grief that is shared by a nation. And then there is a quieter, more complicated kind of grief, one laced with shame and 1,000 unspoken questions. It is the grief for a life that was not taken but given away. You are about to attend such a funeral, a quiet ceremony for a forgotten soldier in a war fought in the dark kitchens of a dying city. A few days after Dima's death, Anya contacts you. The funeral is today, and she asks if you will come. It is a small request, the quiet plea of someone who does not want to stand alone. You meet her outside a small, crumbling Russian Orthodox church on the edge of the city. The sky is a familiar, oppressive grey, and a light, dry snow is falling. The gathering is small and heartbreakingly spare. There is Anya, her face pale and drawn, her eyes empty of tears. And there is Dima's mother, an older woman with a face so deeply etched with sorrow that it seems to contain the entire tragedy of this city. A few other older relatives stand with her, their shoulders hunched against the cold and the grief. Dima's friends, the ghosts from Sergei's apartment, are nowhere to be seen. You step into the church. The air inside is cold and thick with the smell of old incense and melting beeswax from the thin, flickering candles. You are a silent witness to the brief, somber service. A priest, his voice a low, mournful chant, swings a censer, the smoke rising to meet the gaze of the dark, ancient-looking icons on the walls. There are no grand eulogies. There are no fond remembrances of Dima's achievements or his bright, promising youth. To speak of the man he was would be to invite the painful, unspoken question of what he became. The grief in this room is heavy, silent, and laced with a profound and terrible shame. It is the grief of a family who feels they have not just lost a son, but have failed him. You watch Dima's mother as she weeps, not with loud, cathartic sobs, but with a silent, internal, and unending sorrow. After the short service, you follow the small procession to the cemetery, a wind-swept field on the outskirts of the city. The ground is frozen solid and covered with a thin blanket of snow. You watch as a simple, unadorned wooden coffin is lowered into a freshly dug grave. The priest says a final prayer, and the mourners throw a handful of the frozen, clattering earth onto the coffin. It is here, as the service concludes, that you look around and you finally understand the full, devastating scale of the plague that has hit this city. You are surrounded by graves. You begin to notice a pattern. You see a row of simple wooden crosses, and you look at the dates carved into them. A young man born in 1980 died in 2002. Another, born in 1982, died in 2003. Another, 1981 to 2004. The cemetery is filled with them. Dozens upon dozens of young men, all of Dima's generation, all cut down in their early 20s. You are overwhelmed by the feeling of an immense, silent grief. A grief not just of a family, but of a community that has lost so many of its young men to the same fate. Dima is not an isolated tragedy. He is just one soldier in a vast, silent, fallen army of forgotten sons. The small group of mourners begins to disperse, leaving you, Anya, and Dima's mother standing alone at the graveside. The two women do not speak. They simply stand together, two generations of women united in a shared, unspeakable loss. You have just witnessed a funeral not for one man, but for a lost generation. There will be no public memorials for these boys, no holidays to mark their sacrifice. There is only the quiet, private, and unending grief of the mothers and lovers they have left behind in this grey, forgotten city. We imagine the end of a plague as a great victory, a moment of scientific breakthrough or heroic sacrifice. But some plagues are not cured. They are simply starved. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against a monster is not a sword, but a locked door. You are about to jump forward in time to witness the quiet, bureaucratic act that finally starved the crocodile. The grim, snow-dusted image of Dima's funeral begins to fade. The feeling of the biting winter cold dissolves. You feel a sense of time accelerating, the seasons blurring one into the next. The grey, hopeless city of the early 2000s rushes past you in a silent montage of years. You see the snows of 2005 melt, the long summer days of 2008 pass, the first frosts of 2011 arrive and depart. The city changes in subtle ways. A few new cars appear on the streets. A building is renovated. The overt sense of total collapse begins to slowly recede. Your journey through time comes to a stop. It is now the summer of 2012. You find yourself standing on a familiar windswept street corner in front of the same small pharmacy you visited years ago, the Apteca. The place that was the quiet, legal epicenter of the Krokodil epidemic. You step inside. The air no longer smells of disinfectant and decay, but of modern cleaning supplies. The shelves are brighter, better stocked. The tired-faced pharmacist you remember is still there, a few more lines etched around her eyes. but she seems less weary, less haunted. You stand and you watch, a silent observer from a different time. You are waiting for a ghost, and then he appears. A young man, his body thin and trembling, his eyes holding the familiar, desperate, and hunted look of an addict in the grips of withdrawal. He approaches the counter, his movements hurried and anxious. He speaks in a low, urgent voice, the words you heard so many times on your first visit. He asks for several boxes of the codeine-based headache pills. But this time, the transaction is different. The pharmacist does not simply retrieve the boxes. She shakes her head, her expression firm. She points to a small, laminated, official-looking sign taped to the counter. "By prescription only," she says, her voice flat and final. The young man's face contorts with a mixture of disbelief and panicked anger. He pleads, he argues, he says he has a terrible headache. She does not budge. "A doctor's prescription is the law," she repeats. Defeated, he turns and stumbles out of the pharmacy, empty-handed. As you witness this simple, quiet, and profoundly significant act of refusal, the narration explains the key historical event that has taken place. After a decade of a devastating public health crisis, a decade of countless thousands of young people like Dima being devoured by the flesh-eating drug, the Russian government finally acted. On June 1st, 2012, a new law came into effect, reclassifying all codeine-based medications as prescription-only drugs. That single, simple, bureaucratic act did what all the doctors and all the grieving mothers could not. It cut off the supply chain. Overnight, the primary, legal, and easily accessible ingredient for Krokodil was locked away behind the wall of a doctor's prescription. The kitchen chemists could no longer operate. The epidemic did not end with a miracle cure or a dramatic police raid. It was starved into submission by a change in pharmaceutical regulation. You leave the pharmacy and step back out into the summer afternoon. The city is still grey, still struggling. You know that drug addiction has not been magically erased. The young man you just saw will now have to find a different, perhaps more expensive and more difficult path to his escape. But the unique, horrific, and explosive plague of Krokodil, the plague that was defined by its terrifying accessibility, has been stopped. You are left to reflect on the profound, almost unbearable irony of it all. You think of Dima, of Anya, of the graveyards full of young men. You think of the years of suffering, of the flesh turned to rot, of a generation lost, and you understand that this entire, horrifying chapter of history was enabled by a simple loophole, and it was ended by the simple stroke of a pen. Here is the 14th chapter. Chapter 14, The Scars of a City. A wound on the body leaves a scar, a silvery map of a pain that has passed. But a wound on a community leaves a different kind of mark. It is a scar of absence, a ghost in the family photograph, an empty chair at the table. You are about to walk through a city that has survived a plague, and you will learn to see the scars that are measured not in what is there, but in who is missing. Your journey brings you back to the Russian monotown one last time. It is years after the law change of 2012. The city on the surface has begun to heal. The profound, suffocating despair of the early 2000s has lifted. You see new businesses in the storefronts. You see children playing in a newly renovated park. You see a fresh coat of paint on some of the old, grey apartment blocks. The Krokodil epidemic, you are told, is over. It is a thing of the past, a dark chapter that people are eager to forget. But you are here to look for the scars, and you quickly learn that they are everywhere, hidden in plain sight. You spend an afternoon in the city's central park. You see families out for a stroll. You see groups of boisterous teenagers. You see the old men playing chess, the babushkas sitting on benches, gossiping. But as you watch, you begin to notice a strange and unsettling demographic gap. You see men in their 40s and 50s. You see men in their early 20s. But there is a hollow space in between. There are far, far fewer men who would now be in their late 20s or early 30s. This is the generation of young men who are gone. This is the most profound and visible scar on the city. A quiet, statistical absence. A missing cohort of sons, brothers, and fathers. Your journey to understand these scars takes you to find Anya. You find her working in a small bakery. She is older now, a woman in her 30s. She has rebuilt her life. She is married, and you see she has a small child. You see a quiet, hard-won contentment in her eyes. But as you speak with her, you ask about that time, about Dima, and you see a shadow pass over her face. The scar is still there, a place of deep, private, and unhealed sorrow. She speaks of Dima with a sad, distant affection, as one speaks of a ghost. He is a memory from a different, more terrible life. You visit the hospital and find Dr. Tikhanova. She too is older, her weariness now a permanent part of her, but the frantic despair in her eyes is gone. She tells you that the Krokodil cases have vanished. She no longer has to perform desperate, futile amputations on young men. But her work is not done. She now treats the survivors. She tells you about the men in their 30s living with the long-term consequences, the amputated limbs, the chronic liver and kidney damage, the neurological problems, the deep and profound psychological trauma. The plague is over, but its victims are still with her. You walk through the city, and the ghosts of your investigation are everywhere. You pass the pharmacy, and it is now a bright, modern shop. You walk by the apartment block where Sergei's kitchen laboratory once filled the air with its poisonous stench. It is just another anonymous, grey building now, but for you, it is haunted. Your final stop is the windswept cemetery you visited for Dima's funeral. You find his grave. The simple wooden cross is now grey and weathered, and you look around, and you see them again, the silent testament to the plague, the endless rows of graves of the other young men, the boys who were born in the 1982 and died in the 2000s. This is the city's most permanent and undeniable scar. You understand now that a plague does not truly end when the last victim dies. It leaves behind a negative space, a hollowed-out portion of a generation. The city has survived. It is healing, but it is a city that will forever be missing some of its sons. You have witnessed the long, quiet, and permanent echo of a preventable tragedy. A monster is a simple story. It is a tale of evil that arrives from the outside, without reason, but a tragedy is more complex and more human. It is a story of a monster that we create ourselves, born from a series of small failures, of missed opportunities, of good intentions gone wrong. You have seen the monster. Now, in this final chapter, you will reflect on the tragic recipe that gave it life. Your journey is at an end. You find yourself standing on a bridge, looking down at the slow, grey river that runs through the heart of the city. It is years after the end of the epidemic. The city is quiet, moving on with the business of life. But you are a witness to the ghosts it carries. You are here to assemble the final, terrible truth of the story you have documented. You did not just see a story about a flesh-eating drug. The drug was not the cause, it was the result. You have witnessed a tragic, perfect storm of history, a confluence of forces that created the ideal conditions for a plague. First, you remember the city itself, the landscape of your arrival. You recall the silent, rusting factory and the crumbling concrete apartment blocks. You remember the profound sense of a nation's economic collapse. The death of the Soviet Union did not give birth to a vibrant new world here. It left a vacuum, a landscape of unemployment and decay, a foundation of poverty upon which the tragedy was built. Second, you remember Dima, the young soldier, returning from a war to a home that had no place for him. You remember the groups of young men on the street corners with nothing to do. You feel the immense, crushing weight of a generation's hopelessness. They were a generation born into the ruins of an empire, with no clear path to a future, making them desperately vulnerable to any promise of a momentary escape. Third, you remember the context you learned from the old policeman. You remember the stories of the 1,990 seconds, a time when heroin, flowing from Afghanistan, had already created a massive addiction crisis. The government's crackdown, a necessary action, had a terrible, unintended consequence. It left behind a vast, desperate population of addicts, cut off from their supply. This preceding drug crisis created a ravenous, ready-made market for any cheap, accessible substitute. And finally, you remember the quiet, mundane scene in the pharmacy, the simple, legal, over-the-counter sale of codeine-based painkillers. This was the final, crucial piece of the puzzle, the fatal flaw in pharmaceutical law. It was the spark that lit the fuse, placing the primary ingredient for a deadly narcotic onto the shelves of every neighborhood shop. You now see all the pieces clearly. Any one of these factors alone would have been a tragedy. But together, they created an unstoppable engine of destruction. The hopelessness created the demand. The heroin crackdown created the market. And the pharmacy laws provided the supply. It was a perfect storm, and it unleashed a monster. You understand now that the story of Krokodil is terrifying not just for its gruesome physical horror, but for the fact that it was a profound and preventable human tragedy. This was not an ancient, incurable plague. It was a modern crisis, born of specific, identifiable social and political failures. A simple change in the law, a decade earlier, could have saved thousands of lives like Dima's. You look out at the city as the sun begins to set. It is a place that is healing, a place that is trying to forget. But you are a witness. You carry the memory of the grey kitchens, the desperate faces, and the quiet, tragic funerals. Your journey is over, and you are left with the somber, final understanding of how history, policy, and human despair can combine to create a monster. And so, the horrifying plague of Krokodil ended, not with a miracle cure, but with the quiet stroke of a bureaucrat's pen. Your own long journey of the day is also complete. The grim investigation and the difficult truths are over. Let the memory of the grey city recede, and the stories of the lost be stilled. Your watch is over, and it is time to rest. If our journey into this somber chapter of recent history has been a meaningful experience for you tonight, a quiet like is always appreciated. And if you would like to explore more journeys into the past with us, consider subscribing. Thank you for bearing witness with me. May your own world be a place of safety, and may your sleep be a peaceful refuge from the troubles of the day. Until our next story, sleep well